Hey guys, it's Jonathan here from Set Sail, and today we're going to be talking about collage. Specifically, what is one and how does one make one? So, collage is a form of visual art, which is essentially about assembling different materials or sources to create a new piece of work. So, in many cases it's about cut and paste, or taking images and textures and putting them together to create a unified piece of art. The reason I love collage is that there are no rules, and in fact, breaking the rules is what makes it interesting to look at. I see it as the design equivalent of sampling in music. It's taking something old and using it in a new way, giving it a new purpose. Some people say the earliest forms can be traced right back to the invention of paper in China in 200 BC, or a technique used by Japanese calligraphers in around the 10th century, but it's often said to have emerged as an art form around 1900, with artists like George Braque incorporating cutouts into his charcoal drawings, and Picasso who incorporated cutouts into his oil paintings. After that it gained more popularity, being used in Cubism and Modernism as well as pop art, and it was quite disruptive at the time. It's sparking a lot of debate over whether mixed media work can actually be classified as serious art. But nowadays you'll see this kind of work celebrated and showcased in galleries all around the world. Probably the most common style of collage that we see today is photomontage, which is where you take different images and cut them out, paste them together to create a new image. We see this on everything from album art to advertisements, and it's probably the style most people think of when we refer to collage. We actually have a local studio here in Manchester called Dr. Me, and they produced this book called Cut That Out, and it features loads of different collage artists and a really good source of inspiration if you want to get into this kind of work. There is a link to get this in the description if you want to get it. I highly recommend it if you are looking into getting started with this stuff. You should also check out the Brooklyn Collage Collective, who have a website and a really good Instagram account, and there are also a bunch of Instagram accounts that just feature collage work all the time, and they will be in the description as well if you want to go and dig into the collage world and get inspiration for the kind of work that you want to create. Now, the reason I'm digging into some of the history here is because I think it's important to appreciate what makes a good collage so that you can bring that into your own work. And actually the techniques to making a collage are pretty straightforward. You cut and paste things and you stick them together. But the real difference in quality comes by developing your eye to see colour and balance and layout, and that only really comes from studying other people's work and trying to figure out what about it makes it so great. When I look back at old collages, I can see improvements that I could have made, but it's never really to do with the software or the tools. It's more to do with understanding layout and balance and all of that stuff. So that's why I encourage you guys to check that out first before just jumping into what software do I need. But saying that, it is good to know about the tools and the software, so let's jump into that now. Now the first question is, do you want to go handmade or digital? If you're going to go the handmade route, then you want to start by collecting materials. You might want to visit bookshops or local craft shops and pick up different pieces of paper and textures and materials. Often I like to balance quite detailed photos with really simple things, so I like to just pick up coloured paper or interesting eye-catching elements that you can bring in. But one of the freeing things about making a collage by hand is that you can pretty much use anything. You can bring in paint, you can use actual objects, you can bring in like little plants or anything that you want to do. Some of you may have seen the album art for Kristen DeMarco's recent album, where she uses cutouts and paint and even leaves in the artwork. So you can get pretty creative with the things that you use in and bring in different textures. I find that the inspiration usually comes when I find that one image that sets off my imagination, and I can imagine how you can lay it out and different elements that you can bring in with that. In terms of equipment, you probably want to get yourself a scalpel and a cutting mat, which will allow you to get really precise in the way that you cut things out. You can of course use scissors if you're a scissor enthusiast. I'm not going to hold you back from that. Of course, one of the limitations of a handmade collage is that you can't resize an image unless you want to go and scan it in and print it out a different size, but you're kind of stuck with the things that you find, and you just have to find a way of making them work, which is part of the fun of making a handmade collage. Now, personally, I prefer to make digital collages, and the reason being, I love the different effects that you can bring in. I like the ease of being able to move things around and resize things and flip things. I use Photoshop, which is pretty much the industry standard for this kind of work, but there are other software alternatives as well. Anything that you can pretty much cut things out and move them around will do the job here. I like to treat digital artwork in the same way that I would do handmade artwork. So when I'm cutting things out, I tend to use the Polygon Lasso tool, which you cut in little straight lines by clicking points around, and I find that that just gets a slightly rougher edge and it feels more cut out than using something like a Magic Wand tool or some kind of effect to get rid of the background. But again, there are no rules, so if you want to use that as part of your effects and part of the style of your digital collage, then absolutely go for it. But personally for me, I really like the kind of jaggedy edge that you get when you cut something out with the Polygon tool. One thing I like to do is bring in bits of paint or even bits of drawings into digital work. So often I'll draw something out, take a picture with my iPhone, airdrop it onto my Mac, and then bring it into Photoshop, adjust the levels so that you get a solid white background, and then use some kind of blending mode like multiply to knock out the background and have this drawing that I can put over photos and digital images. Now in terms of using images, again this is kind of a grey area. It's similar to sampling in music, like I mentioned at the start. It's one of those things where you can find images online, and if you've changed it so much that it's like a completely different piece of work and almost unrecognizable, then perhaps you don't need to get permission, but you probably should. If you want to be safe, I would say to use your own photos or things that you've collected, or find images on free websites or stock photos, things that you know you have permission to use this in commercial work especially. Now collage can be used to express all kinds of things. It can be like deep, meaningful stuff. Some of them are really whimsical and funny. I personally like to create collages for album artwork, and I think about the imagery that I've used in certain albums or in the lyrics, and I'll try and bring out some of those objects and bring them together into this one piece. And I also like to make collages of places that I've visited. So on my holiday to Rome a while back, I took a bunch of photos, and then when I came home, used those photos to create collages. I just find it one of the most enjoyable art forms and ways of just piecing together all these different things and things that you find and things that you've made, and bringing it all together to create something new. And as I mentioned at the start, I see a lot of parallels in music. Now that I produce music and I'm part of a band, you know, I see similar ways of bringing different ideas and melodies and chord progressions together to create this new whole. It's kind of like creating electronic music. So I hope that gives you a kind of helpful introduction to the world of collage, and if you guys have any favourite artists that do this kind of work, or maybe you do some yourself, feel free to share it in the comments, and we'd definitely love to check that out. Feel free to ask any questions you want as well, and we'll answer some of those in the comments. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next week with another video. Bye!
Set Sail Video Blog. Set Sail Video Blog. It's a video, it's a vlog as well. Set Sail.